Welcome to free CSCS and CPCS video course, the latest, CITB Health and Safety Lessons, 2021, UK. Confined spaces. Workers can become trapped or overcome by fumes, vapors, poisonous or explosive gases when working in confined spaces. This can lead to people dying. Many workers who tried to rescue workmates without a proper rescue plan and the necessary equipment have been overcome by toxic or suffocating gas and fumes, or a lack of oxygen, and have collapsed and died, adding to the tragedy. What is a confined space? Confined spaces are not just tanks, vessels, or chambers. They do not have to be totally enclosed. They can be any place where there is a risk of the following: reduced or increased levels of oxygen in the air, the presence or buildup of poisonous gases, fumes, or vapors, the presence or buildup of flammable or explosive gases or vapors, drowning due to an inrush of liquid, or being engulfed or buried in free-flowing solids, such as sand. Depending upon the work hazards, many places could be classed as a confined space. Some examples are listed below. Excavations and trenches. Inspection chambers, sewers, and soakaways. Service tunnels and shafts, plant rooms, and boiler rooms. Basements, voids and staircases. Lofts, roof voids, and attic spaces. Unventilated rooms and rooms with sealed windows. Oil storage tanks or water tanks above or below ground. An unventilated room may not seem like a confined space. However, if you are using a substance in the room that gives off toxic or hazardous vapors, then you could be overcome and fall unconscious. Toxic paint remover fumes cause death of worker. A worker died after breathing in toxic fumes while carrying out restoration work in a bathroom at a flat in southwest London. The worker was using an industrial paint and varnish remover to strip resin coating from the bath. The room did not have enough ventilation and the 55-year-old victim was overcome by the fumes. He died at the scene and was discovered later by the occupant of the flat. 1. Depending upon the work activity, any space can become a confined space. 2. Entry to confined space with lifeline and rescue equipment. You and your site employer. What your site and employer should do for you. 1. Assess the project. Identify any work that will need workers to enter or work in a confined space, and inform you. 2. Assess the hazards and risk from confined space work and develop safe systems of work, with rescue plans. 3. Make sure suitable confined space training is provided for supervisors, workers, and rescuers. 4. Make sure that anyone entering a confined space is properly trained and adequately resourced with rescue equipment and trained rescuers. 5. Carry out safety inspections. What you should do for your site and employer. 1. Do not enter a confined space unless a safe system of work is in place and you are trained, competent and authorized to do so. 2. Do not take any risks. 3. Do not leave any confined space open or unguarded. 4. Report any safety concerns to your supervisor. 5. If you feel unwell, leave the area immediately and tell your supervisor. Hazards. A lack of oxygen. The air that we breathe contains around 21% oxygen and, at that level, people can work without difficulty. If the oxygen level falls below 10%, it will cause breathing difficulties, unconsciousness, and possibly death. A reduction in oxygen can be caused by the following: hot works or machinery that burns up the oxygen, people breathing, rust, oxidization, inside enclosed tanks, too much oxygen. If the air contains too much oxygen, this can be a major hazard. Organic materials, such as oil and wood, will be able to catch fire and burn more easily, and ordinary materials, such as paper and clothing, will burn more fiercely. An increase of only 4% oxygen is enough to create a hazard. This may happen by accident. In oxyacetylene and oxypropane processes, sometimes not all of the oxygen supplied to a cutting torch is used. Some may be released, increasing the atmospheric oxygen above the normal 21%. Leakage from torches or hoses may go unnoticed, such as during meal breaks or overnight. For this reason, they should be removed and properly isolated at every break time. Depending upon the work activity, any space can become a confined space. Toxic and flammable atmospheres. Oxygen can be replaced by asphyxiating, toxic or flammable gases in the following ways: by stirring up sludge or slurry in excavations, which may release methane or hydrogen sulfide. Natural methane venting from the ground or rotting vegetation. Using substances that give off fumes or vapors, such as solvents, paints, and resins. Sewage, giving off hydrogen sulfide, which smells like rotten eggs and will drive out or dilute the oxygen in the air. Chalky ground, which gives off carbon dioxide, especially when wetted by acidic rain. People breathing out carbon dioxide. Gases, such as LPG, methane, or oxygen enrichment, which build up to form a highly flammable atmosphere. An overturned tanker or a large spill may release petrol or dangerous chemicals into the drainage system. The vapors can travel hundreds of meters. Hostile environments. Apart from the hazards mentioned, other dangers may arise within a confined space. Some examples are listed below. Using electrical and mechanical equipment. Extremes of heat, which can have harmful effects and may be intensified in a confined space. High humidity levels, which can interfere with the body's natural cooling mechanism, preventing sweat from evaporating. Excessive sweating, which will cause the body to lose vital salts. Difficulty getting into, or out of, and working in a confined space, which may involve working at height. The potential hazard of an inrush of water, gas, sludge, and so on, due to a failure of walls or barriers, or leakage from valves, flanges, or blanks, must all be considered at the risk assessment stage. Working in a confined space. Your employer should identify if the work activity, hazards and area of work is, or should be, classed as a confined space. Anyone working in a confined space must be properly trained. Work in a confined space needs safety documentation to produce a safe system of work. A suitable and sufficient task and site-specific risk assessment. A method statement, including a rescue plan. A permit to work, to manage and control entry. The safe system of work will identify important issues, such as those listed below. 1. Emergency exit from a confined space using escape breathing apparatus, EBA. Who the supervisor will be. The supervisor should make sure the task has been properly planned and check safety at each stage. They will need to be present while work is underway. Safe access and egress, how to get in and out safely. What tools and materials to use, and how they should be used. The type of air and gas monitoring equipment and alarm system. Who can enter and for how long, time limits. What PPE and respiratory protective equipment, RPE, to use. The emergency arrangements. The rescue equipment and trained rescue team. The air within the space must be tested before entry, and constantly monitored while the space is occupied using a meter with an audible and visual alarm. If the alarm sounds, the area must be evacuated as quickly and safely as possible. There should be one person, known as the attendant, at the entrance to the confined space, whose job is to raise the alarm and start the rescue plan if things go wrong. There must always be a clear means of communication between workers inside the space and those outside. In some cases, it may be necessary for site management to provide information about the confined space work to the emergency services, in case they may need to be called or involved in the event of an emergency. Never try to rescue someone unless you are a part of a properly trained and equipped rescue team. Use the time to get expert help and call the emergency services. Workers die in an open-topped inspection shaft. At Carsington Reservoir in Derbyshire, 4 young, physically fit men, aged between 20 and 30, died at the bottom of an open-topped inspection shaft. Naturally evolved carbon dioxide had displaced the oxygen, but no tests were made before the first man entered. He collapsed and the 3 other men in turn climbed down, trying to rescue their colleagues. They were overcome by the lack of oxygen and later died. Environmental awareness and waste control. Environmental awareness is increasingly recognized as being one of the most important issues affecting the world today. Protecting our water supplies, reducing pollution that speeds up global warming, and avoiding industrial processes that destroy our ecosystems and wildlife habitats are all vital actions that the construction industry must take to create a more sustainable built environment. The construction industry is the single biggest consumer of resources in the UK, using around 420 million tons of materials each year. The industry also generates a huge amount of waste, around 100 million tons each year. About 20 million tons of waste goes to landfill, including 10 million tons of new, unused building products. The poor management of materials and resources on a construction project can lead to large amounts of waste. This is costly, bad for the environment, and it can be unsafe. The following are some ways that waste can be produced. Poor design. Incorrect ordering or over-ordering. Incorrect storage and management of materials leading to damage. Poor workmanship. You and your site employer. What your site and employer should do for you. 1. Develop procedures for avoiding nuisance and pollution and for protecting wildlife and heritage, and tell everyone involved. 2. Provide means to safely store, distribute and use materials to avoid damage and pollution. 3. Provide means to segregate and dispose of waste correctly. 4. Explain any specific environmental issues at site induction. 5. Provide information on emergency response procedures and provide the resources, such as spill kits, for immediate action. 6. Identify and color code site drainage as foul water drains, red, or surface water drains, blue, and combined systems, red, C. What you should do for your site and employer. 1. Turn off plant, equipment, and taps when not in use. 2. Reuse materials where possible. 3. Where possible, avoid or control the creation of dust, chemical pollution, and noise. 4. Avoid creating waste and dispose of waste correctly. 5. Know where the spill kit is, how to use it and report any incidents. 6. Show respect and consideration for neighbors of the site and members of the public. 7. Report any environmental concerns you may have about pollution, the protection of wildlife, historic buildings, and archaeological finds. Sustainability. You will increasingly hear the word sustainability being used in connection with construction work. Carrying out construction in a sustainable way affects everyone in and around the industry. Sustainable buildings are built with materials that are resource efficient and have a low environmental impact. They are energy efficient, reduce water consumption, create minimum waste and improve the natural environment and human health. One element of sustainability is to carry out construction work in a responsible way to avoid any environmental damage that could cause problems for future generations. Examples of good practice are listed below. Designing out waste, such as making the unit off-site, making site dimensions to match standard product sizes, or adjusting site levels to reduce the amount of excavated material going off-site. Using local labor and services to support the local economy and reduce energy and emissions associated with travel. Using locally produced materials to minimize transportation of raw materials and finished goods, to reduce the project's carbon footprint. Saving energy and water by recycling rainwater, good maintenance of vehicles and turning off equipment and taps when not in use. Avoid creating pollution that will damage the environment. Using reclaimed or recycled materials or materials with a high recyclable content. Only using timber and other wood products that can be fully traced to sustainably managed forests. Reusing leftover materials wherever possible to conserve raw materials and save the energy it would take to produce new. Segregating waste into different types, so it can be reused or recycled more easily. Implementing good storage management procedures to avoid damage, pollution, double handling, rain damage, and breakages. Fuel, energy, water, materials, and time are often wasted on construction sites, practices which need to be stopped or at least reduced. Fuel, energy, water, materials, and time are often wasted on construction sites, practices which need to be stopped or at least reduced. Environmental responsibilities. Responsibilities of the person in charge of the site. The person in charge of the site has contractual and legal responsibilities to make sure of the following. The client's environmental requirements are carried out and met. Environmental planning conditions are met. A named individual is appointed with responsibility for environmental issues. Environmental damage and nuisance are prevented during and after construction. Information is provided to all site staff on factors affecting wildlife, areas of historical and archaeological importance, and other special protection orders that may be in force on the site, such as tree preservation orders. Harmful substances, such as chemicals and fuels, are stored and handled correctly to prevent spillage or pollution. Employees have the resources available and are trained how to use pollution response equipment, for example, spill kits and booms. Waste materials are properly segregated to support recycling and avoid pollution. Waste is correctly handled and companies who transport, treat, or dispose of waste are registered and licensed. Accurate records and documentation are kept for all activities regarding transfer, treatment and disposal of waste. Your part in preventing environmental damage. You should be given instructions, training, and advice during and after site induction so you understand the following. The site's environmental rules, such as how to dispose of your waste. What damage your work can have on the surrounding environment. What procedures and controls are in place to avoid waste, nuisance, and pollution. What you need to do as an individual. What to do in an emergency, for example, correct use of a spill kit. Who to report any environmental concerns or issues to, and how. That you should stop work and seek advice if you uncover archaeological objects, disturb wildlife, or damage protected historic buildings or monuments. 1. Bats roosting. 2. Stonehenge. Pollution. Causes of pollution. Deliberate or accidental leakage of substances, such as cement, silt, grout, sewage, chemicals, oil/greases or vehicle fuels, that soak into the ground or contaminate rivers, streams, and ditches. Discharge of contaminated liquids into drainage systems, both foul and surface water. Deliberately or accidentally allowing waste material to escape from the site, through being windblown or through leakage, and contaminating adjacent land and/or water courses. Mixing contaminated, hazardous materials with other waste, for example, putting rags used to clean up an oil spillage in with general waste materials. Mixing plasterboard or gypsum-based waste with biodegradable waste. Allowing smoke, fumes, or dust to contaminate the air and surrounding surfaces. Causing too much noise, light, or vibration, which can affect the quality of life of people who live or work nearby. Why pollution occurs. Substances enter rivers, streams, ditches, drains or the ground because they aren't stored correctly. Not having properly protected, bund, containment area that captures any leaks, preventing pollution, storage areas to contain any leaks or spills of harmful liquids, for example, oils, fuels and solvents. Not protecting or covering stockpiles of hazardous or non-hazardous materials, resulting in them being blown by the wind and creating dust, or washed into the ground or water courses by rainwater. Failing to adequately protect waste material skips, resulting in rainwater washing harmful residues out. Rain and muddy surface water running off-site onto roads, into drains and water courses. Not having processes and equipment in place to report and control environmental incidents. The poor maintenance of plant and equipment resulting in fuel and other leaks, excessive noise and/or air pollution. The illegal burning of waste materials, and fly tipping. A spill involving just 1 liter of oil can contaminate 1 million liters of drinking water. Your part in preventing pollution. To avoid creating pollution, you should always adhere to the following. Follow the instructions in the Control of Substances Hazardous to Health (COSH) assessment and any site rules when using any substance, particularly with regard to storage and disposal. Keep the lids on tins of paints, adhesives, and solvents when not in use. Keep oils, fuels and chemicals within bunked areas when not in use. Prevent spillages by careful handling and pouring of harmful liquids. Keep harmful substances at least 10 meters away from features such as watercourses, drains and ditches. Pollution spreads easily. Spilled or leaking oils and fuel can be particularly damaging to the environment. It is possible for leaking substances to soak deep into the ground and pollute groundwater, which in some cases becomes domestic drinking water. 5 liters of oil can contaminate an area the size of 2 football pitches, damaging the nutrients within the soil that helps plant and crop growth. If it gets into surface water or groundwater, pollution may appear several miles away and could poison fish or other living organisms. Spilled materials must be properly contained using absorbent materials, not washed down with detergent. Refueling site vehicles or construction equipment must be carried out by an authorized person. Where possible, the refueling should take place in a controlled area with a hard surface that prevents spilled fuel from soaking into the ground. The following points should be implemented if refueling has to be carried out away from these areas, where the ground is unprotected. A drip tray or absorbent mat must be used. It must be cleared of any spilled fuel afterwards by using absorbent spill cleanup materials. Refueling must take place at least 10 meters from watercourses or drains. Where 10 meters cannot be achieved, speak with your supervisor, who should then put in place further control measures. Pollution absorbent mats, known as plant nappies, capture fuel and oil leaks, preventing ground pollution. Regulatory bodies recommend that refueling is always carried out under supervision. Where possible, refueling should be carried out using a pump supply through a nozzle fitted with an automatic cut-off to avoid overfilling and spillages. Where necessary, funnels should be used to assist in preventing spills. Never leave a tank to fill unsupervised, and always replace lids and caps on containers. Do not dispose of harmful substances into drains or gullies. Site drain covers should be color-coded to show what type of fluid is allowed to pass through the drain. Blue surface water, such as clean, uncontaminated rainwater. Red foul water, such as sewage and silty runoff water. Red, see combined surface and foul water, both of the above descriptions. If the product you are using displays the sign on the label or COSH assessment, then it is harmful to the environment. Any substances left over, including the container, must be disposed of in line with the COSH information, regulations, and site rules. Concrete and cement washout is highly alkaline and can cause severe pollution. Water from washing out any mortar or concrete mixing plant or ready-mix concrete lorries must not be allowed to flow into any drain, watercourse, or to ground. It should, in ideal situations, be recycled for further washout processes. Waste concrete and washout water can be placed in a line skip, allowing settlement of solids. If the appropriate environmental consents, permissions granted by the environmental agencies, are in place, the surface water can then be pumped to a foul sewer or taken away by tanker. To promote sustainability, the settlement solids from the concrete washout can also be processed to reclaim the aggregate and be recycled for reuse into the works. Washout areas should be designated and at least 10 meters away from watercourses and drains. If you are involved in pumping water out of an excavation, dewatering, you must be aware that silted water must be treated before it can be discharged into surface water drains, rivers, streams or ditches. Site management or your supervisor must make the decision whether the water is silty and needs treatment prior to discharge. A lot of construction work takes place on what are known as brownfield sites. This means that the land has been built on or has been used for industrial purposes before, in which case it may contain hazardous substances. In most cases, pre-construction surveys will have been carried out to identify any hazardous materials, and your employer should include this information as part of your site induction. However, you must immediately stop and tell your supervisor if you find either of the following: soil that has a strange smell and or appears to be oily. Fragments or clumps of fibers that could be asbestos or other hazardous materials. Pollution incidents. If you are involved in a pollution incident, such as a chemical spill or discharge of contaminated water, make an initial assessment of the risk. If you can take action safely, make sure you have the correct personal protective equipment, PPE. If your assessment of the risk places you in danger, raise the alarm and inform your supervisor. Do not put yourself at risk. If you are aware that an environmental incident or spill has occurred, then act quickly and follow these simple steps: stop, contain, notify. Stop further contamination with corrective actions, such as standing up oil drums or closing a leaking valve. Contain the contamination by using spill kits, building earth or sand buns to prevent the contamination from spreading, making sure you direct flows away from unprotected drains. Notify your supervisor or employer of an incident as soon as possible. Do not ignore or cover up the incident over fears of being blamed, as not reporting an incident can lead to far greater consequences. As well as the points above, the following steps should be taken. Eliminate all sources of ignition. Do not switch plant or equipment on. Remove sources of heat and sparks. Spill kit deployed. Cover drains or inspection chambers to stop the substance entering unprotected drainage systems. Check the spill has not reached any nearby drains, inspection chambers, watercourses, ditches, ponds or other sensitive areas. Dispose of all contaminated materials, such as absorbent granules, soil, or cleaning cloths, used to contain the spill in the correct hazardous waste skip. Report the facts to your supervisor or employer, who will notify the appropriate environment agency and take action to prevent the incident reoccurring. Waste materials. Your employer has a responsibility to identify how and where they create waste. They should identify opportunities for waste prevention, reuse, recycling, and reducing the amount of waste going to landfill, in line with the waste hierarchy. Always check if someone else can use what you are about to throw away, as it might have a use elsewhere. Different types of waste should be segregated into different skips or bins so that they can be recycled more easily. Recycling waste means that it does not have to go to landfill. Waste hierarchy. Hazardous waste must never be mixed in with other types of waste. To assist, color-coded labels are often put on skips or bins to show what type of waste should be put in them. If hazardous waste gets into landfill, it can be damaging to the environment. It must be removed from site by specialist contractors and treated before being recycled or disposed of correctly. Asbestos. Batteries. Used spill kits. Fluorescent light tubes. Waste solvents, such as white spirit, oil, and bitumen-based paints. Epoxy resins and mastics. Segregated waste streams. Environmental damage can result from poor waste management in the following circumstances. Poor housekeeping, exposing unprotected waste to the weather and scavenging animals. where controls of waste segregations are insufficient. Where hazardous waste is mixed with other waste, such as asbestos cement mixed with rubble, or plasterboard with biodegradable material. Insufficient checks on waste carriers who illegally dispose of or fly tip the waste. Inappropriate disposal of contaminated concrete washout water into surface water, such as streams and rivers. Everyone has a part to play in preventing environmental damage. By being aware of the potential environmental risks that arise from your work, you will be able to avoid incidents, which will help to create a more sustainable and healthy environment for everyone. Oily rags segregated into hazardous waste containers. Nuisance. No one on site, or in neighboring locations, should have to suffer nuisance and possibly ill health because of site activities. Talk to your supervisor if you think that the work you are doing might be causing a nuisance to other people. This may be the case if your work activities result in any of the following nuisances occurring. Creating delays and congestion on local roads because of poor traffic management planning and logistics. Contractors and site operatives parking cars without giving consideration to local residents. Causing excessive noise, particularly during unsocial hours. Creating vibration that can be felt off-site. Mud or dirt being deposited on public roads or footpaths. Vehicle fumes and noise causing a nuisance to nearby properties or people. Generating foul odors, smoke, and dust. Managing dust and emissions. Creating off-site dust clouds from haul roads. Site lighting or task lighting shining onto nearby properties or people, including road traffic. Many large contractors are signed up to the Considerate Constructors Scheme, which requires them to maintain high standards of respect and consideration for site neighbors and the general public. Plants and wildlife. Landscapes, plants and wildlife are valued by the general public and contribute to a healthy environment. Damaging, disturbing, or removing protected plants or animals can speed up rates of decline for some species and result in prosecution and fines for the offending company or individual. Construction activities can impact on the environment in the following ways. Disturbing birds, bats, badgers, and other protected species. Removing or damaging habitats through vegetation clearance. Disturbing aquatic wildlife and impacting on water quality. Disturbing wildlife through noise and vibration. Damaging trees and hedgerows. Your employer should inform you about, and you should follow, all of the protection measures that are in place to protect plants and wildlife. Archaeology and heritage. Archaeological remains and historic buildings provide a valuable historic record and identity of the country, adding to a sense of belonging for the population. They are recognized as being an irreplaceable part of the country's national heritage and are therefore offered protection against unlawful or accidental damage. They also contribute significantly to the economy through tourism. For these reasons, your employer should tell you about the controls and your responsibilities when working on historic buildings, or near to or on archaeological and heritage sites. These could include the following. Having an archaeologist on site during excavation work. Careful recording during dismantling activities to allow replication in reconstruction. Providing extra protection to existing buildings to avoid accidental damage from vehicles and plant. Specific processes to follow if you uncover previously unknown architectural details, decoration, or items within buildings. The legal reporting process you must follow if you uncover human remains or treasure. Thank you for watching and good luck for your test.